Hey Dick, good morning. Great
Niels,
to
good
have you here.
morning.
Well, welcome to the first series of the expert interviews with Conway and Co. I'd like to start off with a quick intro question. Could you maybe introduce yourself and what you do at Mr. Marvis?
Yes, of course. So I'm Dick, e-commerce director at Mr. Marvis. I'm basically commercial and technical responsibility on the website, making sure this aligns well with the whole omnichannel journey, of course. I joined in August 2022, so 1.5 year now. Basically established an internal tech team, workflows, basically how do we ship features and how do we maintain the website. Still hands-on. I like to program. I was basically educated in programming. Studied information sciences in Amsterdam, and now e-commerce director at Mr. Marvis.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you bring that up. That's also one of the first questions I had. Is like your background is very technical. Would you say that's of help in what your current role is? And because a lot of other people in your similar roles are less technical than yourself, how do you see that in terms of relation to your background?
It helps really in like the technical understanding and all the interplay of systems. Sometimes it's a trap though. Then I say like I will program this, or out of enthusiasm I want to get my hands dirty. Well, I'm better off just doing the strategy and letting others do their job, right? But sometimes it's helpful, especially when there are deadlines and just we need hands-on. I'm happy to program.
Yeah, sure. No, it's I can see that. That's where you're a professional. You see other people doing it. It's hard to keep your hands off. I can relate to that as well. Yeah, that's all learning in building out a team, right? But I think what I want to elaborate on a little bit is that the main goal of this podcast is basically to understand how you and the team they play the game called e-commerce. That's basically how we see it, and that's also how we present it to our clients. And we'll go through a couple of areas to sort of understand a bit better how you work and what makes you digitally successful. That's my main goal. I think that's one of the things I like the most about my current job is the fact that I'm constantly meeting new and interesting people, and I get to learn from them. And that's also how this format originated, basically. So, if that's a bit of a broad question, but if you would answer that, how do you play the game called e-commerce? What do you think is fun about it?
On a personal level, I'm really curious, and it started from a really young age. I have a twin brother, so any question he had, I also suddenly had that, and that's basically how we also both learned programming.
Okay.
And I've taken that into basically my team culture, cultivate curiosity on learning.
Yep.
And also in engineering, web development, e-commerce development, I highly believe that our rate of learning will determine our success. And the rate of learning is a broad term, and it can be team education, it can also be an A/B test, it can be your velocity. Every website release you do is basically a learning opportunity.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect analogy in that sense. And if you would expand on that, right? So I think there's a lot of complexity within e-commerce and in software development and technology. I heard that you also have kids, myself as well, and that's very good training for myself as well. If you try to explain something to a 7 or 8 year old kid, in my case, how do you explain what you do? And I'll follow up with my answer to that as well.
Yeah. It's funny actually. In ChatGPT, I often type in "explain it for a 10-year-old."
Yeah, exactly.
But that aside, for me, it has to do with being agile, breaking down complex releases, massive releases into sub-steps, smaller releases. In more technical terms, putting it behind feature flags sometimes, ship the code, enable it for just 1% of the traffic. It can be rough, it can be suboptimal, slap on a beta label for instance, but get feedback in. Start to familiarize yourself and the engineers and the business with a new feature, for instance.
Yep.
Sometimes you cannot really break it down if it's like a data migration, a data scheme change. It's just making sure you really understand what's happening behind the scenes. I'm on a personal level again. I'm Um, Sometimes it, it can take too much time, right? You don't want to rush those things, slow people down sometimes, including myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and then if you relate it to your own goal, like from a day-to-day basis, so you said you originated from programming. What do you do day to day as a head of e-commerce? I think that's the thing. Like my daughter always says, like, you just send emails all day. Well,
Yeah.
to some extent that sort of shifted as well, right? From writing code to sending emails. But how would you really simplify that and describe that?
Well, definitely a lot of emails. Using the right tooling actually helps. I'm not sure if you are familiar with Superhuman. It's an email client, really keyboard focused.
Yep.
It saves a lot of time, and
It's a bit like the console, right? So it's sort of your technical background pops up again.
yeah, exactly. Lots of meetings. Also, don't be afraid to reject meetings, right? If they're unclear, well, what's my goal, what's my purpose there? But still, a lot of alignment is needed, basically, in a growing company as Mr. Marvis. Basically, I'm also the Scrum Master in our team, so I'm making sure everybody is aligned, we have the right backlog, the right sprint, how we ship features I'd like to keep an oversight on that. Yeah, it's a tough question. What do you day to day? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
sometimes people ask me, "Hey, is the website never done?"
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
laugh. Yeah, good question. No, it's never done. Yeah, you keep on being busy.
Yeah, and I would add to that, it's not just about the website, right? I'm assuming that you're responsible for a lot more than as well. It's the only thing that people can see often, but yeah, the whole technology stack has a lot of more depth to it as well.
Yeah, the website is ultimately like a final link in the chain, or not even the final one, actually. I just did a quick count on our IT infrastructure. There are basically 55 subsystems that have to interplay each other in order to have a correct website.
Yep.
And making sure that those systems are aligned and all online, working properly, being monitored, being maintained. That's where your time goes.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I mean, right? That's also the depth that people often don't understand, and the complexity that a high-performance e-commerce stack brings, right? It's almost like orchestrating all these different systems and keeping everything up and running. So, yeah. Yeah, often the answer I also give to my daughter is to say, hey, I'm a bit like a company doctor, right? So, and I think that's to some extent, you would be also a bit like a maintenance person as well, right? So you keep everything up and running. So if something breaks, let's get Dick in the room and he'll fix it, right? So
Yeah, I actually heard that phrase before, so yes.
Yeah. So the often now is that what I try to do with companies is to understand how it works. Sort of the patient, sometimes the e-commerce manager or sometimes the executive, they come to us and say, hey, something is broken. Can you build me some dashboards, or this system is breaking down or whatever? And then I try to figure out, and we try to figure out what it means in terms of technology, but also how that relates to the strategy part, right? Because that's one of our core beliefs, that we don't feel that technology in itself is a goal, but it supports the business ambition and business goals and strategy, right? So it also brings me to my next question: is that how would you phrase that sort of that big ambition? What would be the sort of the perfect headline on the Financial Times in a couple of years?
For in the context of Mr. Marvis.
Yeah, I would say let's start there.
Basically, Mr. Marvis, we want to become, or maybe we are already for some users, but an icon of men's shorts and trousers. Everybody knows the Lacoste polo. We want to be that for shorts and trousers. So that would be a nice title on the Financial Times.
Yeah, perfect.
What we really want to tackle is removing that divide between online and offline, and I'm not the first one. This is often said before, omnichannel buzzwords, yes, but there's so much value to gain there. For instance, the sizing problem. Going to a store, picking something out of the racks, and then trying it on. Online, you cannot do that. We're still looking into size guides, even AI, maybe even VR, AR at one point, to tackle that.
Yep. And I think that's also where the sort of the interplay between the channels is really interesting, right? So it sort of brings we often say like elevate the benefits of a certain channel. So online it's great to do search, it's great to do other sizing things, but offline, yeah, there's human service, there's experts able to answer your questions or to feel the fabric or stuff like that, you know. And in the end, it's all about the end-to-end experience. So yeah, I think that's fully true. So, but I really like that sort of being the iconic, like the. Like cost of shorts. I think that's a great quote. Yeah, perfect. And if you would like from that big vision, what are the things that would bring it down to 2024? What are the sort of the key areas that you're now focusing on for you and with your team?
Yeah. So we at Mr. Marvis we added a lot of products in the past year, and we continue to do so in this year.
As in the catalog, you mean, right? So physical product. Okay.
Yeah. Physical products. So new colors for existing products. New ranges, new styles, and in January we actually launched our first shoes.
Oh wow!
Collaboration with Filling Pieces, but that growing catalog actually means a lot for all those IT systems. And the catalog management, how do you sort and filter, and then we now start seeing the pain points. And it's becoming a bottleneck for us. Mm-hmm. We want to squash that. Fix that bottleneck. So we're looking into website redesign, and that's again like one of the final pieces of the chain. In order to have proper filtering, sorting, our content management system, which is Sanity CMS, needs to be able to store the data, cope with the data. We need to be able to query this. And we run an headless website stack, so composable, and the front end split from the back end.
Yep.
Still there, we can make a lot of improvements in the data model actually for the product. Mm-hmm. But they need to align with our ERP, website of course, point of sale systems in the stores, Shopify, which is just our order management system. A lot of systems that have to be aligned. So that's a key focus for this year, growing catalog. And helping users with that catalog also means something. So the obvious sorting or filtering, like I said, but we're also going to start doing more personalization on the website. Yep. For instance, we already know what somebody owns of our products. We can then suggest products that really pair well with that outfit. So a step further than basket analysis, often bought together. Now we have like curated outfits in our backend, in our content management system. So if you own that trouser in that color, we can suggest that top.
Exactly,
that
yeah.
Size and that color.
Align the sizing as well already. Yep. Yeah, that's very smart. I think that yeah. And I think maybe is your backend also fully serviced? Is it also fully composable, or is there just one system currently, like Shopify, or are there multiple systems already on the backend as well?
Multiple systems. The boundary between backend and frontend is blending a bit here, but a lot of data is in Sanity CMS. Mm-hmm. And it has a lot of flexibility in the content model, in querying the content model. And basically in our headless stack, once you add products to the cart, there's a handoff between our website and Shopify. So from then on, Shopify is the order management system and the payment provider.
Yeah, and the so Sanity, Shopify, yeah, clear. No, I think that and if you would bring all these different systems together, and I think what you mentioned earlier, like 55 different systems, something I've experienced myself, which is quite challenging, and that is how do you explain or relate that complexity to other stakeholders in a way, right? So you mentioned on personalization. Is that personalization also coming from one of these systems, or is that an additional system that does that for you?
Now, that's something we are going to work on. So we're still in the research phase right now. It will probably be another system. So number 56. Now, so that understanding that complexity is quite a thing. When I joined Mr. Marvis, we had like an IT chart overview. It became apparent that it was just a subset of the IT overview, basically. So I made a new one. And then it immediately becomes really visible. Okay, we have a lot of systems, nodes, and edges between those systems, so the linkages. yeah, it's very direct, in your face. This is it.
Yep.
So really try to visualize the complexity.
Yep.
And also on the dashboard running, that everybody in the company sees that stack. Sees what we are doing in the e-commerce team.
Yeah. No, those are two great tips. So like making the visual of even hanging it as a poster in the office, for example, right, to show those 55 systems. And do you mean like an uptime ping or something, or is that something that you send to people as well? Like, hey, these systems are performing like this or like that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, we have uptime monitoring, but basically only we get a signal if it's down. I don't want everybody to stress out that that's something that's fragile. It's not. Yeah. No, but we did have sessions in the company where, in this case, I presented like the e-commerce vision, what it all means, what we do, the workflow. It boils down to helping others understand what we're dealing with from a day-to-day level, but also on a more strategic and tactical level.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I mean, right? That's often where the challenge is. The sort of the business stakeholders, they want their feature, right? So they released like, hey, we have this new updated catalog. Why is this taking so long, or why is this personalization so complex, or whatever? And I think that these two tactics you just shared are a great way to so how to bring these two sides together, right? To make the understanding for both sides a bit better. But we discussed quite a lot of the digital capabilities already. But what's your view on what to do in-house and what to outsource? That's also sort of a topic what we see with a lot of consumer retail brands that are at scale as well. It's a sort of continuous decision, right? So from strategic to operational, what are the things that you would like to specifically always do in-house, and what are the things that you would consider doing outsourcing?
Yeah, you're spot on. It's a continuous decision. There's no right or wrong here. It's a tough one. For me, it boils down to, if we have the expertise in-house, I'd rather keep it in-house. Mm-hmm. And we have very smart developers in the team who also want to keep educating themselves. So I don't want to give all the tasks to an agency. As an engineer, you also want to keep on learning.
How big is your engineering team now?
We have 2 developers in-house, and if you add myself, 3.
Yep.
If we lack the expertise, obviously we ask an agency.
Yep.
Sometimes if there's a deadline, we ask the agency to help out. But yeah, it's a case-by-case basis. We also ask agencies, and then they were really fair to tell us, yeah, we have some expertise in there, but you probably are better off doing it yourselves.
Yep.
Thanks for the transparency, and then we do that.
Yeah, and I also mean that even outside just development, right? So outsourcing is often connected to engineering, but also for marketing, right? So I'm assuming that your e-com team is cross-functional as well. So you have UX designers, marketers, all the different data analysts, for example. So in general, is that sort of differentiation? If you have the expertise in-house, you do it in-house, but I'm assuming it's also a bit more deliberate decision, right? So is there like a generic view you have on that?
There's not really company guideline on that, but it boils down to getting expertise in, or sometimes more an audit kind of point of view.
Yeah.
There's seasonality at MR MARVIS. The company started as a shorts brand, so in summer we basically had to scale up, and that holds true for a lot of teams in the company. So then we asked agencies, and we outsourced during the summer months. Yep. Especially for CX. The seasonality is lowering a bit now that we also sell a lot more trousers and also tops, t-shirts, shoes. It is like a flexible layer we have across the company to scale up, to get knowledge in.
That makes sense, especially if it's seasonally driven, right? So that flexible capacity is great for that. I think that's another sort of thing to point out. Sort of the decision between it doesn't have to be continuously, right? So in-house or outsourcing, it can fluctuate as well. I think there's always sort of a core team, but then from there you can make the decision based on capacity or whatever, or missing expertise or things like that. And customer centricity, I think you already mentioned that The online and offline journeys, yeah, you have your own stores now as well. What's the sort of the practical tactic you have that within the team? Like, do you do user research? Do you sit within the stores, or how does that work?
We did that actually. So we had an employee of the e-commerce team go to the store, finally observe customers, and sometimes not silent, just asking them questions, and that gives so much information of what drives this customer. We really try to put the customer centric, and what you shared before, IT is ultimately a means to an end. And the end is to serve our customer, bring value to them. Yes, the physical product, but also the ease of the purchase, whether it's online or offline. We do have, like, on the dashboard, we have a dash, who are our customers? Just making it really visual, every time on top of mind. We develop personas. And we often,
what does that dashboard look like? Is that like a counter, you mean, or is that like a visualization?
Demographics.
Okay.
So hard data, where are these users coming from? So the Google Analytics source medium.
Yep.
Age brackets, etc. And we really try to drill down also per, for instance, age bracket. So the return rate per product, and maybe then per group, per age group. Often there's a lot of information hidden in the data if you drill down, and information gets lost in aggregation. And that's something we try to recurrently look at.
And how many personas do you work with? Is that aligned across the team? So from product design up until e-commerce, or how does that work?
It basically started in the e-commerce team that we have 3 personas.
Okay.
But you see this being adopted by other teams out of usefulness, enthusiasm.
Yep.
And I really want to be able to say that one of our personas is his name is Rudolf. Rudolf, he won't understand this.
Yeah.
It becomes like a communication starter, and that also in the end customer centricity.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's definitely the role, right? And then if it sort of aligns between marketing, between sales, between everyone, that really clarifies a lot. And I think that also relates to the point you made earlier: is the make it visual, right? Make it in your face, either from a morning email or from a dashboard, big up in the office or whatever. I think that's always a great tactic to keep it top of mind. And if we then switch a bit more to the data and metric side of things. Could you maybe explain a bit the dynamics between the metrics model that you use? Is that something that originated also from your e-commerce team, or do you have a metrics model? How does it work for your team?
We don't have an elaborate metric model. We're not there yet. We have a great data team in the company. It's a separate business unit. They help us out with our e-commerce metrics, which is still mostly CVR and AOV. As a proxy for CVR, we use add to cart, since basically the whole checkout is Shopify, and we cannot do that much with that. It's optimized by Shopify.
Yep.
They have a great checkout, so we use add to cart often. AOV is becoming more important for us since we are looking into personalization and growing catalog, so cross-selling. Therefore, AOV item count. The metric model itself, yes, we have a funnel, of course, obviously. It can be more elaborate, yes.
And how does it? You mentioned that you have a dedicated data or BI business intelligence team. How does it relate to other parts of the company? Is it discussed at the management team level, for example, or how does that relate?
So what I see is that this data team is doing very in-depth analysis, but after the facts, if you will.
Yeah.
We're now getting into a phase where this information silo they have, a data warehouse, we want to proactively use this. So we're looking into reverse ETL solutions that we use this information in on-site personalization, for instance.
Yeah.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah, no, fully. I think that's always the interesting part, right? There's always what we see often with clients that there's actually too much data, so that they are looking too many different metrics or KPIs or whatever you want to call it, and then sort of they get lost in translation to some extent, right? So they are not, or they're used in very detailed parts of specific teams, but not abstracted on a more, let's say, more a management team level, for example. How do we actually be proactive, and how can we act based on this data, right? So in the end, that's, I would say, is the goal of business intelligence, is to support, like when I was in university, I think the term that they used back then is actually better. It was called decision support systems, and it sort of morphed within business intelligence. But in the end, that's the goal, right? So yes, you use data from the past, but to make decisions going forward, right? So that's the goal. And then the challenge often is that if there's too many, like especially if you have a very elaborate data warehouse, what do you actually look at, right? So if you have a data analyst, they run analysis for you, they give you answers. There's this shift coming to self-service BI, right? That other people within the company are actually that they're able to make their own analysis. I think that's a lot where AI will help, right? So the code interpreter of OpenAI is a great example of, finally non-data educated people can always interact with that data, which is currently a bit challenging because they can't write SQL queries or stuff like that, right? So I think that's sort of the thing, and that's also the difference between data and KPIs and metrics, is that what we see the best results with is if it's sort of company across the company, right? So from even within the hierarchy, so that you have, these are the metrics we look at every week, every month, every quarter with our management team. Then it brings it down to the head ofs. So then we have someone, the head of e-commerce team or the head of supply chain team. They have their own set of metrics, and then you have it within the teams, right? So you at least have 3 layers. But that's the challenge, and maybe that's also the follow up there. Is there like a sort of a key, almost North Star metric or like a guiding metric that everybody in the company needs to know, other than sales, obviously? But is there something else?
Not really. No. If you put the customer centric, basically we want to help men getting dressed.
Yeah.
Make the best user journey. So revenue, yes. Item basket size, yes. Conversion rate, yes.
Mm-hmm.
North Star is a bit tougher in non-SaaS, I guess.
Yeah. I think what could happen, for example, in the future is if you want to have a metric around the cross-selling, right? So if you want to bring people from just the shorts and the pants that everybody knows Mr. Marvis from, to bring them into other categories, for example, right? So I think those are the main successful North Star metrics, is that they resemble let's say a behavior you would like to see from your customer base, right? But I think that's definitely an interesting point to further develop. And maybe if you talk about your data culture, do you know when that data team originated? Was that before you joined already, or?
Before I joined, so I cannot answer that question. What I can tell you is that it originated by management, basically. You have investor decks you need to make. Okay, what's our data? And then they do all kinds of analysis. And now you see a shift happening from after the facts management reporting into feeding all this data into the rest of the company.
Yep.
Or actually not the data, but the knowledge.
Yeah, the insights from the data. Yeah. No, yeah, perfect. No, I think that's it's impressive that you already have that as well, right? That's something we see a lot lacking with even companies that doesn't even matter if they're very online or offline. Like the more online first companies have more data in a way to use, but also the ones who are more retail focused, for them the same, right? They also benefit a lot from at least having that everybody's looking at the same scoreboard. I think that's one of the key things, and that's also where we bring in this gaming analogy, is that when you're playing a game together, it helps if everybody's aligned on what the guidelines is and how to play that game, but then also always look at the same scoreboard in a way, right? So, and if I would shift it a bit to people, you mentioned you discussed a bit the developers in your team. How big is your own responsibility? How many people are reporting into you?
My team is 7 people, and that's a mix of engineers, UI/UX, product managers, so maintaining the catalog. UI UX, more on the research part of things.
Okay.
And then head of e-commerce, more on the back-end operations.
Clear. Yeah. So there's also a differentiation between front stage and backstage in that sense.
Yeah.
And if you would talk more about like the organizational blueprint, I think that's always very interesting for listeners as well, is the difference between online and offline, right? So you started as a full online company, started off rolling out offline as well. I have some experience in that as well, but how does that work within the organizational blueprint of Mr. Marvis?
You also see a shift happening there. So it started off, let's try out a store, and then you slowly build a retail team, and then the stores are successful, and you open more and more stores, and the retail team grows. And out of enthusiasm and people really putting the customer centric, the head of retail, and then myself, for instance, we start aligning. And luckily that's in the culture of the company, that bottom-up initiatives start.
Yeah.
Okay, how do we get the retail stock on our website? As you browse the website, you want to see if that trouser is in stock in our Amsterdam store before you actually make that trip. This feature is not available yet, but it's close to being done. So to summarize, allow for bottom-up input features, data. Maybe that's the key element of that blueprint.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's that's great to hear, because that's often what we see companies that, and it doesn't matter if you either originated online or offline. That these, let's say, channel owners, they're almost in conflict with each other, right? And I always say, like, in the end, you both serve the same customer. Like the goal here is just to provide a seamless experience to both, and they don't really care about your internal organizational structure, right? So it makes it a bit more manageable, maybe. But in a way, it shouldn't affect the customer experience. It should just work together in providing that best experience, right? So, apart from if you're a channel owner. And could you maybe tell us a bit more on sort of the day-to-day operation? What's the rhythm that you have with your team?
We've made a mix of holacracy, it's like a working model, and Scrum. So we really picked the best parts of both worlds. Basically, we have 2-week sprints in the e-commerce team, and other teams actually started adopting this too.
Okay.
2-week sprints start off with sprint planning, but we call that just an e-commerce weekly. Where we align on many elements, not only the sprint planning or the backlog, but also we look at OKRs, KPIs. We look at some session recordings we have on the website, just for additional qualitative and ultimately quantitative data.
And is that within your team only, or you share that, you like present that to the rest of the teams as well?
We occasionally share that to other teams if we see interesting details. But it's ultimately open to everybody in the company.
Yep.
But yeah, this e-commerce weekly is where ideas start, and it's also room for bottom-up input in my own team. Then we basically start developing, and in those 2 weeks, I really want to let things go, right? That's the whole idea of a Scrum sprint. We like to ship fast, deploy fast, and the agile way of working, put it behind the feature flag, deploy it, but start learning as soon as possible.
Yep.
And ultimately, a sprint retro is also about celebrating your successes. Having a beer, having a laugh, right?
For sure, yeah.
The sprint is done. And the more zoomed out, we have more an e-commerce strategy session within the team every 3, 4, 5 months.
Yep.
Depends a bit on the season, where we look at, hey, what's coming up in the next year.
And how do you connect that? Is that also the moment to connect it to sort of more company strategy? Because that's also often the challenge, and especially with the role that you're in now, is to sort of the bridging the gap between the company strategy and the more operational execution. Does the management team follow a similar rhythm, or how do those two things connect?
I can't say for the management team, but at one point we get basically the management strategy once or twice a year. And indeed, in those e-commerce strategy sessions, we align that with our own strategy. More on the technical level, of course, but if management decides on expanding to country X, then we need to start breaking it down into more tactical steps in the e-commerce team.
Yeah.
And other teams will do the same.
And if you make a bit more personal in the your digital leadership role, what do you feel is really important? I'm assuming this is part of it, right? So to connect with the management team, to explain all the complex technology stuff that we just discussed earlier as well. What do you think are very important capabilities or skills for a digital leader?
Curiosity.
Yep.
And also being pragmatic and being able to filter through the noise. So out of curiosity, we can see a new system or a new technology. At a personal level, yes, awesome. But filtering through the noise, yeah, I've seen and go a lot of systems, right, and new technologies. If you jump on every bandwagon, yeah, you're only revisiting your stack, and ultimately you don't deliver value to your end user, to your customer. It's also an ability to simplify complexity. Explaining really complex stuff to non-technical people is not trivial. But ultimately, a lot of people and teams need to align on the same subject. And it's my job to help them understand what's technical debt, what's holding us back, what are our bottlenecks.
Yeah, I can very relate. I think I fully agree. I think that's and maybe a bit personal, but what do you feel like your own development is? Like, what are the things you would like to get better at yourself?
The quantity of communication.
Okay. As in volume, you mean, like the amount?
Yeah. So basically, me being originated as a developer, it's my comfort zone, right? Being behind the laptop, programming, shipping features. I want to build awesome stuff.
Yeah.
And then, yes, I often say overshare. I'd rather share a bit too much in our own Google Chat, Slack channels to other teams and to management. But we can do that more often. I think that holds true in the whole e-commerce team. It's very easy to fall into the trap of, hey, we need to ship this and do this and this ticket and this ticket, and there's so much work to do that you start skipping on communication. It's really, really important.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's also what I thought that you meant, like doing these almost like these demo sessions with a wider team. That's often a very good sort of communication method that doesn't bring too much additional workload to the team, right? Because then you don't need more workload for that in that sense. But if there's already a process going in that sense, it helps to invite a lot of people from outside the team as well, because they get understanding. And what I've seen as well is that they then sometimes adopt that tactic as well. So you see, for example, the retail team, for example, adopting a similar rhythm and also doing this sharing and demoing of the things that they achieved. It's good for team achievement, but it also helps to educate the rest of the organization in a way, right? Without too much additional workload for you and the team. And if you would bring that,
see that happening, definitely. It's what we like to do is every half year for new employees at the company, we like to host a break the website session, a monkey testing session, right?
Yeah.
Put people in a room, let them speak out loud, and okay, now place an order, visit this page, do some scenarios, and try to break it. Click on the elements that you are not supposed to click on. It's really informative. And what you see happening is that, okay, this every 6 months has now become every eight months, right? Sometimes you skip them, but it's really important to follow the same rhythm.
Yeah.
And also the rhythm of communication.
Yeah, the consistency is key. That's the thing to keep that. And I think that's where we're sort of a bit lucky within the digital realm is that we have this methodology around agile and sprints and stuff like that that already sort of brings the natural rhythm to the team in by itself almost. But I think that's definitely something that really brings progress in a way, right? And maybe final question on team: how do you approach talent acquisition and retention? Is that something that you struggle with, or is it easy to find digital talent?
Easy and hard. Let me explain. So I do an atypical interview process, perhaps quite short. Like I don't think it's fair to the candidate and ourselves in terms of time to make it really too complex. And ultimately, we know after 10 minutes of speaking with the person, hey, is this a match? And for me, it has a lot more to do with soft skills, the personality. Do I see myself working with this person? Than the hard skills.
Yeah.
Because the digital industry is moving so fast, and the technique that's important right now, outdated in 5 years. So we'd rather get like an easygoing, easy to work with, skillful person that can learn fast than an expert in React, right?
And I think that also relates back to the in-source and outsourcing thing, right? So if there's a very specific skill, you can always hire that somewhere externally. Yeah. But I think that's a great point. That's also one of my mantras is sort of to hire for attitude and train for skills, right? So these skills are in sort of continuous fluctuation, and you can take a course or you take something else to educate yourself or the team. But I think that's great. And how does that work in practice? Do you have an internal hiring team, or is this something like, for example, that you outsource?
HR, of course, helps us in hiring and sourcing. For IT, we basically recruiters help us out, but the interviewing is done internally.
Yeah,
and that's done by myself and other members of the e-commerce team. Because ultimately, we all have to work together with this person. So it makes sense to let as many people as possible from the e-commerce team interview new additions to the team.
Yeah. And I think that's what I've seen is a lot of companies struggle with finding and hiring digital talent. What would be your sort of key point advice in being attractive or finding this talent?
So why I said it's hard. It's hard to hire seniority. Especially in programming, there are a lot of boot camps who educate programmers in 3 months, and then they go on the job market. Sometimes great persons, and in interviewing you see a great learning mentality. Sometimes a boot camp is not really the right learning method. Then we need to help them educate on the job, of course. Internal succession is also quite important. That's, do we give room, time, resources to educate themselves? And that it's not only like money for trainings and courses, but also offsites and sharing knowledge within the team and pair programming. And we really like to do those initiatives in the team. For instance, last week we did an hackathon where we used AI to make ChatGPT actually to make a new size guide. Okay.
Nice, and that's also great to bring other people from the from other teams again in as well, right? I think that's the. I think we covered quite a lot in terms of strategy, in terms of the data part, in terms of people as well. And if we would discuss a bit more sort of on the day-to-day execution and the process that you're following, what have you seen? I'm not sure if that would be fully within your responsibility, but if there is a cross-functional team working, what I've seen within the marketing or digital marketing, there's high-level sort of two main categories. There's demand generation and demand capture in a way, right? So where demand generation would be more within the Meta or Facebook ecosystem, and the demand capture more within the Google. Yeah. Where do you gravitate as Mr. Marvis? Is that something within your responsibility as well?
Yeah, generating demand is basically the marketing growth team, which is a separate team, so it's not
Okay.
an e-commerce team. Of course, we align. We do have to provide the plumbing, for instance, on telemetry, data tracking, conversion tracking
Yeah.
for the marketing team. Demand capturing, that's where the e-commerce team comes in, right? Helping people get rid of their money, ultimately. Yeah, it's not that there's a really encompassing vision between those two elements.
Is that also more how it's structured? So the marketing team is more like top funnel demand generation, and then the e-com team is more in terms of conversion and demand capture from Google and from the more technical marketing channels. Is that how it's sort of split up?
How it's structured, yes.
Okay. So it's more across the funnel. So from awareness to acquisition, and then you're more in. And where does retention fall, for example? Is that within the e-com team or marketing then?
Retention falls into, yeah, you can look at this from multiple angles. So repeat purchase, driving ads for repeat purchases in the marketing team, helping users with their accounts, building full outfits, full looks, is more the e-commerce team.
Okay. All right. And if you, I think that's also interesting when you joined the company, they were already quite mature. Could you explain how that growth flywheel sort of worked? What are the key growth or acquisition tactics that you've seen being successful?
So Mr. Marvis relies a lot on ads, and those ads are really, really successful. Basically, it's for a lot of users still the first touch point with the brand, and then they hit the website and they're being retargeted. Hopefully they place an order, but if not, we have a soft conversion like a newsletter subscription.
Yep.
And, personally, I did not expect that. I thought email was dead, but it's not. A large share of our revenue is coming from email. Newsletters, they still work. Maybe that has to do with a very broad age group of Mr. Marvis. Ultimately, men in their 20s, 30s until and including 60, 70, and even further. We should drill down in the data actually, which groups still open emails, but
yep.
That's more in the marketing team actually. Yeah, the growth flywheel. People love the range of colors we offer. So adding new colors to existing categories is like an additional incentive to, let's take a look back at the website.
Yeah.
Check out the new colors. And you know your size already. You know the fit of that style already.
Yeah, exactly.
New color. But once they are on the website, it's a great opportunity to cross-sell and build outfits. And we're now getting more and more into that phase since the catalog is quite wide now. Last year, the first photo shoots happened actually with the models being in a full Mr. Marvis outfit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Everything you start seeing right now, new elements on the website, full Mr. Marvis outfit.
Nice. Yeah, that's a milestone.
Yeah.
Brilliant. No, thanks for sharing that. I think that's exactly what I meant. That's very insightful because I think that's and ads. I would say you mean that in the widest sense of the word, right? That's ads across the highway because when you cross the airport here in Amsterdam, you can't miss them, right? There's always a Mr. Marvis billboard there, and then from there they transition to the website. They interact with the brand. And then I think that's also the brilliance about the simplicity of the concept, right? So there's a limited number of styles, but very extensive coloring range. And I think that very much aligns with how the male brain works in terms of the functional part of it, at least, sort of how it works with your helping people make purchase decisions. You know, it's like, hey, I don't have to stress about the fit. I know the quality is good. Let's get it in first one color and then upscale to 5 colors. Is that sort of how it works?
Yeah, and I think on personal level, simplicity is undervalued in any industry.
Yep.
The KISS paradigm, keep it simple, stupid, right? And that's what we also focus on in UI, UX, website development, engineering. It should be as easy as possible, and imagine like the most dumb person, and then a step further, that's what you should cater to, right?
Is that one of your personas as well, or not?
No. No, but it's sometimes a trick I try to remember. Simple. And fun fact, actually, we are a men's brand, but around 40% of our customers are women.
Oh, really? Wow.
So ordering for themselves or ordering for friends, family, husband, friends.
Yeah, okay, clear. But not wearing it themselves, or...
Well, also wearing themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there any patterns you can see or share across online and offline? Is there a correlation that you see sort of in the buying behavior?
We see that a lot of first purchases are done offline.
Offline, okay.
If those people live relatively close to a store.
Yeah.
And then repeat purchases happen online.
Yeah. Yeah, so that has to do with the trust that you mentioned as well. So probably they first want to get access to quality. They want to know that they have the right fit, and then sort of repeat purchases. So would you say it's a LTV strategy as well, like a lifetime value strategy, or more an acquisition strategy?
Yeah, ultimately LTV is an important metric for us. We do look at cohorts, and what does a new cohort purchase in our whole lifetime, LTV. We see that customers stay with us, and they enter the brand basically in peak season with shorts, and then in lower season during the winter, they start buying other products like tops. That said, this effect is becoming less strong since our catalog is way bigger now.
Yeah.
But that's how it historically used to be.
Clear. All right. I think we covered a lot. Maybe the final part, we haven't really talked about the technology part yet. So that's what I wanted to finalize on. You shared a bit on sort of the complexity of the stack and the ambitions around personalization, for example. So what I've learned is that every technology stack is not perfect, right? It always has its thorns in a way. Which part would you love to reinvent, or which part would you love to have not been there before you sort of joined the team? Is there a part that you say, that I'm very much not really happy with, or?
There's always technical debt. That's a fact of life almost. There's always like a small thing in the back of my mind, like, hey, why is capturing an order, capturing a payment so difficult? So we run a Shopify and the Shopify payments too. It's great, it's flawless.
Online and offline or not?
Yeah, offline too. But still in the back of my mind, I'd like to program this myself, and that's the programmer in me basically. It should not be that difficult. And you get into complexity with carriers and then validation of form fields and international addresses, and so I understand all that. Ultimately, yes, that's something that keeps going on in my mind. Hey, why is this so difficult?
Yeah.
Same for handling payments.
Yeah, and I think that's also related to your simplicity part, right? So I know this metric that, for example, a company like Netflix, they have, I think, over 100 different versions of their sign-up form, for example, and it's the same thing. Like, how difficult can it be just create an account, right? Yeah. But there's so many different permutations of that, and I think that's the same with something like Stripe or Adyen or Shopify, or in terms of the payment service providers. It's just taking a payment, but there's so many different variables there that that's actually one of the most complex part of the most complex part of the stack.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, on the other side of that, what's sort of the most, let's say, indispensable system? What's really the heartbeat of the operation?
Nowadays, besides Shopify, of course, well, actually, maybe just our laptops.
Okay.
Or the light switches.
Yeah.
No, but having great people, having a culture of learning, flexibility, adaptability. Ultimately, any system is replaceable. Replacing it itself can hurt. It can take time, resources, yes, but any system is replaceable. A key part is our content management system nowadays. So since we run a headless stack, Sanity CMS is basically taking care of the catalog.
Yep.
And then
product and content.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
And then there's basically a handoff based on the product identifiers to Shopify.
Okay.
So Shopify itself does not contain much product information for us anymore.
Yeah.
So that CMS is important. Yeah, our hosting. We host on Vercel. If it's down, it really hurts. For the rest, it's like a hygiene factor. It should just be up. But it helps us in rapid iteration. 10 years ago, hosting was still complex. You had to do a lot of engineering yourself on the hosting, like sysops. Vercel takes care of that.
I think in that sense we're very lucky, right? So it gets more abstracted by the year, I would say. And if since you also manage the stack for the other teams, is there another system that like some other teams, like these are very technical things. I think the marketing team won't even know what we're talking about. But are there specific systems that they really cherish or get a lot of value out of?
For the e-commerce company, I can really recommend LFR. We use LFR. It's basically a data layer as a service.
Okay.
Integrates with Google Tag Manager and Shopify. All the engineering you normally have to do with events on your website and then sending that to Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics and other systems. Basically, LFR takes care of that.
Is it like a CDP as well? So is it different from something like Segment or?
They are starting to get more into CDP territory.
Okay.
So it's sort of an internal pivot by LFR, if I observe that from a distance. Basically, they acquire more and more customer information, repeat sessions, and they start to enrich the information sent to forwarding to follow-up systems.
Yeah, exactly. But it doesn't have the distribution side of it then, because that's what sort of has been a challenge for a lot of the CDPs, and now you see like Klaviyo, for example, merging in the CDP with their email and SMS distribution. This is still separate, so this is a data aggregation part, but that's not the distribution side of things yet.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And in terms of features, is there one feature that you feel that really differentiates you? Because I assume there is also a reason to go headless, right? So there were certain complexities on the front end or specific things with a way of working with your teams that you decided to do so. Is there a specific feature that you feel that's really a differentiator for Mr. Marvis?
Yeah, the shop to look experience I was talking about before. You don't see that much on our website yet, but it's something we keep on building and will be more prominent in the future. Shop by look as a starting point instead of going to a category. Mm-hmm. If you go into a store, you also don't really shop by category. You shop by what looks nice, like the mannequins in the store, all kinds of elements that influence your what to do next in the store.
Yep.
And like online is go to category. So we're doing a lot of updates in there. Personalization is going to be an important driver for Mr. Marvis.
Yep.
Since that catalog is growing. And like the international expansion. So the backstory for our migration to headless is that we have currently 15 different Shopify instances.
Ah, okay.
It was quite a heavy workload to update all those catalogs in those 15 instances. A lot of duplication.
So you had an instance per country, for example, or
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And that has to deal with Shopify in the beginning of the company not really supporting European market.
Yeah, and translations was always a challenge.
Yeah. So then we implemented headless. Then at least we now have one CMS for all copy, all content in all languages.
Clear.
So yeah.
And how do you? I think that's my final question on technology as well. Is how do you keep sort of tap with the pace of innovation, right? So there's especially within the technical or digital realm happening a lot. I'm assuming that a lot of people within the company approach you for new things as well. What's your personal way of keeping up with the news?
Twitter is a great resource. I'm really a Twitter leech, if you will. I follow a lot of people, and then it hits my timeline, and I read a lot. Conferences,
okay,
do help.
Yeah,
and really try
actually
to
see people for once as well. Like that's for the digital people, it's a bit of a strange thing often, but I agree. I think conferences are great. Yeah,
conferences, and it's. We do that with the whole team, or we try to do that with the whole team. It's not only myself, it's the whole team should keep up to date. And that can be on the latest version of React, or that can be on domain-driven design, or low level and high level. It's curiosity that helps. Following the news channels, new websites, podcasts, sometimes buying a book. Sometimes I bought a book and gave it to employee. You should really read this. Curiosity.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's a great way to end it as well. Like the curiosity is sort of then you find your own news, right? If it's in podcasts or newsletters or Substack or things like that, I think that's something I've really enjoyed myself. But curiosity is a great driver for digital success, I would say. So thanks a lot, Dick. I think it was very insightful, and we went quite in depth, which I really enjoy. So thanks a lot, and hope to see you soon.
Yes, thank you, Jans, for having me.
Perfect. Thanks, man. Bye-bye.